This will be for the con assignment using slope and intercepts in context. All right, so here it says, Jay collects eggs in a basket and weighs the basket. He graphed the relationship between the number of eggs and the total mass. What does the slope represent in this context? All right, before you go to the multiple choices, I would try to figure it out without looking at the choices first. Okay, so if you recall, slope is change in y over change in x, and they want to know what the slope represents. Well, the y is the mass, okay, and the x is the number of eggs. So the slope represents, since the change in y is mass, and the change in x is the number of eggs, I would say the slope represents how much the mass increases for each egg added. All right, so that's my interpretation of it. So let's check our answers. The number of eggs that fit in the basket, no. The mass per egg, let me see the other ones. The mass of the basket, no. None of the above. Let's see, the mass per egg. Does the slope represent the mass per egg? Well, for each egg, let's say you start with 1 egg and go to 2 eggs. The slope would be the mass divided by 1, right? Because you're just adding 1 egg. So I would say answer B is the best one. How much the mass goes up for each egg added. That's basically what I said. How much the mass increases for each egg added. And B says the mass per egg. That's right. All right, let's see. Students have a choice between taking a test on paper or the computer. Mrs. Ghazi graphed the relationship between the number of students taking the test on the computer and the number of test pages she would need to print. What feature of the graph represents how many pages Mrs. Ghazi would need to print if none of the students take the test on paper? Okay, that's pretty easy. This is 0 right here. So if none of the students, if 0 students, hold on a sec, wait a minute. It said, which feature, how many pages she would need to print if none of the students take the test on the computer. Okay. So, if 0 students use the computer, that would be this right here. Okay, this is the y-axis, and this is the x-axis. So this dot right here is the y-intercept. All right, so that's going to be the answer. Let's see the choices. The slope, the x-intercept, the y-intercept, none of the above. That's the y-intercept. All right. Madhavi scoops a bowl of cereal out of a container that has a mix of oat and wheat cereal pieces. She graphed the relationship between the possible masses of oat and wheat and cereal in her bowl. What does the y-intercept represent in this context? The y-intercept, again, this is the y-axis. This is the y-intercept right here. The y-intercept is always at x equals 0. So this point represents the mass of oat cereal when there is no wheat cereal. Okay? When the wheat cereal is 0, this is the mass of the oat cereal. So the y-intercept is mass of oat cereal when there's no wheat cereal. With no wheat cereal. All right. The mass of the cereal if it is all oat pieces. Yes, that's correct. It's basically what I said, the mass of oat cereal when there's no wheat cereal. All right. Reagan graphed the relationship between number of bars of music played and total number of times his metronome clicked. What feature of the graph represents how many times the metronome clicks per bar? All right. Remember slope, change in y over change in x. Y is the number of metronome clicks, and x is the number of bars played. Okay? So if you divided this out and found the slope, you'd have the number of clicks per bar. Which feature represents how many times the metronome clicks per bar? That would be the slope. All right, pretty easy.